Welcome in. It is another week of Scrushy on Business. My name is Dave Green, joined alongside by Richard Scrushy. It is a pleasure, sir, to be with you again. How was your week?
Had a very good week. Sure did. How about yours?
Had a great week. Have a lot of business activities that are going on, including negotiating for a new signal that we are trying to purchase. So you know how negotiations can go, Richard. One day it's good, one day you're worried.
I'm telling you. Yep. You got to stay on top of it, or you'll end up on the wrong side of it. So that's so important. Well, we had a lot of questions coming in, and a lot of things kind of deal with the whole visionary, versus entrepreneurship. And people are asking us a lot of questions about various different things, and I'm really excited about that because what I'm seeing, Dave, is that there are people that are interested in starting their own businesses, and a lot of them are struggling with getting started and what's first, what's second, what's third. And I had a guy that sent in, young man, I think, and what I can tell here, he came in on the Facebook page to us, and he made he said, he said, I like the podcast. He said, I've got a question though, and he said, I'm not very good at managing people. Well, I mean, I understand that. He said, and being sensitive to their needs, but he said, I'm really a hard worker. He says, and he calls himself a workhorse, and he says, he said, I expect the people that I work with to be the same way. And he asked me, he said, am I wrong about that? Is that something that I should be concerned about? And then, of course, I said, what do you mean? And he said that he thinks that being a workhorse is better than being a show horse. And he asked me, he says, what do you think? And so I said, well, what do you think a show horse is? Just trying to dig it a little bit. And he says, well, it's somebody that tries to look good, but yet doesn't necessarily do the work that's necessary, that is required by the job. And my thoughts on that is that, you got to look good. I think that's important, but you got to be good and you got to do good and you got to be productive in what you do. So, my response back to Aaron, his name is Aaron. Aaron, you need to be sensitive to other people's needs. You truly do. And you need to lead by example. I would say that if you set the example for others to follow, and you communicate with others in a very nice, pleasant way, and have great working relationships, and just nothing wrong with working really hard and outworking other people. I've done it my whole life, and I think it's something that you should do. You don't need to brag about your success. You don't need to brag about the fact that you're working harder than other people. Just let them see it. And at the end of the day, what really matters is the people that own the company, your supervisors, the leadership in the company. They see what you're doing. You'll climb the totem pole. You'll get the promotions. You'll get the raises. You'll get the bonuses. So I would focus on doing a good job, but I would make it pleasant, and I would be sensitive to other people's needs. I think that's always important because you really don't know what people are going through in life, and life is not always easy, and some people have it a lot harder than others. So, be kind and loving to people, and be a good friend, and help people when you can. If you see somebody fall down, pick them up. I've always believed that. There's nothing in the world wrong with helping someone and picking them up and helping them do better. But setting an example is really important. I think that's really key. So that's my advice to Aaron this morning, Dave. What do you think?
No, I think it's great. When you're a manager, one of the most difficult things to learn is that you have to manage people differently. You can't it's not a one size fits all, right? It's, the old comparison to a basketball team. If you try and manage every player on your team the same, you're not going to get the results that you expect. And there's a great story one time, I believe it was Tony Dungy, who was the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts, and a rookie fell asleep in one of his meetings, and he cut that player on the spot. And about a week later, Peyton Manning started to fall asleep in one of Tony Dungy's meetings, and he walked up and put a pillow under his head. Peyton Manning had earned that, right, as opposed to the rookie. And so you have to realize that everybody is an individual, and trying to manage people, it's very difficult, especially when you first do it.
It's interesting. I was watching, somehow, I don't know, there was something this past week on the internet, or maybe the week before, had to do with Coach Saban. One of his players was telling the story. Did you see that? Where he was saying that He was late to a meeting and had all the players there. And Coach Saban didn't say anything to him during that meeting. And then when it came game time, right before the game, Coach went up to him and said, I'm not going to play you today. And he said, "You're not going to play me." And this guy's first string. And he said, "No." He said, "You were late to that meeting." And he said, "My problem is not the fact that you were late to the meeting. My problem is that you didn't come and say, 'Hey, Coach, I was late to the meeting, and here's why.' And I wish I hadn't, and I apologize for that, and I won't let it happen again." He said, "That's all I needed." So he didn't get to play that game. The guy loved Coach Saban, and he said it changed his life, and he said it made him really respect things, in his life going forward. So sometimes, you just got to face up to, if you got a problem, and you go to your superior and tell them, "Hey, I couldn't make it." But it was a very interesting story, and the guy ended up having tremendous respect for Coach Saban because he did that, because it was kind of a wake-up call. And that's some of the things I wanted to talk about today. I go back to when I was just a young guy in my early 20s. I had tremendous energy, and my energy was such that sometimes I got myself into a tight, Dave. I would get into arguments with people because I thought I was smarter than other people, or maybe that energy had me, pushing and trying to accomplish things that maybe were not appropriate at that time. And I had a superior once that set me down, and he said, "Richard, look, you have a lot of energy. You're a smart guy. Use it in a very positive way. And right now I'm seeing some negative things happen. And if you could take that energy and use it all in a positive way, then you're going to accomplish a lot more in life." Well, it was a turning point in my life. And I think I was like 22, 21. And it really did make a difference to me when that man took the time and set me down and said, "Hey, I think you're going in the wrong direction. Here's the right direction." And it helped me a great deal and changed my life. And one of the books I wrote, I actually talked about the fact that I had this opportunity to have some coaching in my life. So as I say to our viewers today, if you're in a leadership position out there or you're building a company, you're going to have the opportunity to coach and counsel young people and help them be part of what you're trying to accomplish. And I will tell you that in that situation, when I changed, I ended up getting a promotion within a year, a major promotion. And because I became more productive, I became a better player on the team. And there are a lot of people out there that, and Dave, you've seen them, that sometimes they just never change, and they want to fight with the leadership. They never want to be a full member of the team, pulling the wagon together, doing what's got to be done. And, you're going to build a company. That's so important to be part of that team. And it takes everybody pulling together sometimes, because there's some difficulties at times when you're building a company. So, and just putting that out there, and it's just something that any of you younger people that are watching today, being part of a team is important, and showing up on time and communication and working together. You don't have to beat up your coworkers. You need to work with them and lead by example, set an example. So anyways, I don't want to beat my audience up to death about that, but that is important. Don't you agree?
Very, very important. And I want to make sure we get to as many questions as we can this week. We always invite you. You can write in info@scrushyonbusiness.com. You can ask a general business question, or you can ask something specific about your business or situation, as Marcus in Charlotte, North Carolina did, Richard. He says he's got a profitable lawn care company and a SaaS idea, software as a service, for those that don't know what SaaS stands for. He says, how do you decide whether to pursue a service business versus a product business when both seem viable? What do you think?
That's a perfect question for what we just went through. Let's take the guy's simple scrub. Let's take Billy Manovich. Billy Manovich had a great job, and he came up with this idea to build that brush, that simple scrub brush. But he was making money at this other job, and he used the income off of that job to be able to start his product company. And so sometimes that's important. You have to have income. So if you're going to start a software company and you're not initially, you've got to design everything. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of time to put it all together. Yeah, you're probably going to have a job to pay the bills until you get there, and maybe even use some of that money for funding. So I think what you do is that you continue with your job that's generating your income until you get that. You just have to work 16 hours a day, 20 hours a day when till you get your product company ready to launch. And then you may even have to keep working your day job, till you can get it launched and begin an income stream. Now, it may be that what you have developed is so good that you can package it, model it, put your business plan together, and raise funding for it. Well, if you can do that and you have the funding coming in, you'll know, well, I don't need to keep that day job over there, because now I have the funding to pay myself, buy my groceries, and pay my rent, so I can now spend full time in this business. So it really is a balance, and it's something that you just have to measure yourself, and you'll know when it's time.
Great question, Marcus. We appreciate you writing in. Here is a question we have not hit yet on the topic of franchises, Richard. And Lena in Phoenix, Arizona wrote in and asked, what are the real trade-offs between starting independent versus buying a franchise with systems in place? And before you answer that, just in general, Richard, what are your thoughts on franchises?
Well, I think franchises are fine. I really do. I think a lot of times that people that want to run their own business, they buy a franchise. A franchise brings a lot to the table. I'm a believer in certain franchises, okay? They have already modeled everything out. It's a proven concept. They bring the business side of it to the table. They bring national, international marketing sometimes to the table. In most cases, they'll have all that set up. All the formulas, they have proven the concept. So what you're paying for is what they have already developed, and they've already spent a lot of money on that. So nothing wrong with buying a franchise. Now, and look, there's a gentleman in Houston, Texas, is my understanding, he owns 400 Burger Kings. Well, he's a very wealthy man. As a matter of fact, he's listed in the Forbes 400, as I understand, one of the multi-billionaires in the country. But he owns other restaurants as well. So I think he probably owns a couple of thousand restaurants. But he is, all of the restaurants, most of the restaurants were franchises. Now, he does own some of the franchises. Now, he's actually bought the whole restaurants out, is my understanding. But he built a very successful company owning franchises. Now, and again, franchise, a proven concept, and something they already have formulas. It works. So there's nothing wrong with that. But there's also nothing wrong with you developing your own company and that can sell franchises if, in fact, that particular model works. Let's go back real quick just to Ray Kroc, okay? Ray Kroc, I think he was from Illinois. He's visiting out in San Bernardino, California, and he goes into, a McDonald's restaurant, and he's fascinated by how quick and how efficient this restaurant is and how good the product is. And his fascination, making a long story short, ended up in him wanting to franchise. He didn't initially buy the McDonald's restaurant, but he wanted to franchise what he saw. And of course, he did. And then many years later, he did buy the actual business from the McDonald brothers. And there's an entire show on all that. But my whole point being is that he wanted to franchise what he saw. And I actually had the same experience. I went into a restaurant once that was believe it or not, they specialized in chicken. And it was a great, great chicken restaurant. And they had 5 of them, I think. I think it was 5. So I called the owners. And I talked to them about the possibility of me franchising. I said, I'll just cut a deal with you. I'll give you a portion of it. I'd like to franchise what you got. And I was unable to get them to let me do it. They told me they were going to do it on their own one day. They never did. And I think some of the restaurants ended up closing because it was a family-owned operation and they didn't do what they should have done. We at the time were going to invest several $1 million into the business. I had partners that wanted to do this as well, and we were going to take their business and do exactly what Ray Kroc did. Now, since then, I've seen Zaxby's and, all these other chicken places that are very similar to what we wanted to do. So it was a great concept. It was a great idea. There's probably even still room to do that now, but because people tend to eat a lot of chicken. So, but the bottom line is I like franchises. It is a way for you to own your own business, and if you can afford it and get one started, I mean, some of these franchises are very, very successful. So, it's just up to you. If you got a great concept that you think you can build and grow, hey, that's one thing. But if you get a proven concept, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and of course, I think there's the obvious differences, right? You get
Mm-hmm.
into a franchise, your creative ideas may mean nothing. There's
True.
not a whole lot that you can do. I get a feeling, I'm just going to guess here, you wouldn't be a great franchisee because I don't think
Well,
I would be.
no, yeah. In other words, you can't decide. Well, I'm going to have a special today. I mean, if you
Right.
own one of these food franchises like Chick-fil-A, you can't come in and say, we're gonna put more mustard on it. No, There, it's going to be exactly like you got to. And McDonald's the same thing. I mean, you get in the franchise that everything is spelled out for you. Now, if you are a creative person and you're right, and you want to have a special on Tuesday, and my family did own some and still has some involvement in pizza restaurants, and if they wanted to have a Taco Tuesday night, they could do it. There's no problem. But if you're a franchise, you just can't do those kind of things. Yeah, you're very limited. You got to live within their rules, or you'll lose your franchise. So you're exactly right, Dave. So it just depends on your personality. If you just want to own a bunch of businesses that will give you some kind of decent return, and you have the money to invest, nothing wrong with owning some of those. But even in some cases, if you don't manage them right, those go under as well. I mean, you got to work hard to make that franchise work.
Yeah, nothing is easy, and it is
No.
not guaranteed. That is for sure. And I will make this suggestion. I've looked into it with my business partner several times. We still look into it, even though I don't think I would be a great franchisee. But get a broker and look into them and dig deep because you want to go through all the steps because you will learn quickly what being a franchisee is like.
And
Um,
go to that and yeah, and check that place out numerous times before you decide, and kind of mystery shop them. You don't, you just go in there and check it out. Nobody knows what you're there. Just be a regular customer and experience it. Look at the pricing, look at how they run it, look at everything associated with it. And then you can make a decision whether or not it's something you want to do or not.
Hunter from San Jose, California wrote in, Richard. He says, can entrepreneurship be taught or is it mostly temperament? What skills should a non entrepreneurial visionary develop first? We've talked about this before, and you just mentioned it again. A lot of it is personality and your own personal desires and the things you think you like. But what do you think about Hunter's question?
Well, let's talk about it. Entrepreneurship actually is fairly misunderstood, and let me explain this. Okay, if you go look up the real meaning and the real definition of entrepreneurship, and I'm just going to read it here, and this is one of the many definitions, but it's an individual who establishes and operates her own business, taking on the financial risk in the hope of a profit. Is characterized by their ability to identify opportunities, innovate, and manage the complexities of running a business. Now, there are a lot of people, Dave, that want to call themselves entrepreneurs that are nothing more than just visionaries. You can be a visionary and not be an entrepreneur. You can have a vision about something, but that doesn't mean that you're willing to take on the risk. See, that's the key. That's what truly defines an entrepreneur. You're willing to take on the risk, the financial risk, running the business in hope of a profit. Now, a lot of people are not there. They see ideas, they have ideas, and that's one thing. But that doesn't mean you're an entrepreneur. Will you step out and take on the risk of the business? And I remember last podcast, I said, that the entrepreneur really doesn't feel the pain of the risk. That it doesn't worry them. I mean, if you are truly and you have the spirit of a real entrepreneur, you're not worried about the risk. You take it on. You already see the vision. You can see what's going to happen down the road, and you believe in yourself enough that you say, "Hey, I already see this. I already know that I can make this work," and you go after it. So a real entrepreneur is going to venture out, take on the risk of the business. They are people who not only have the innovation and see the opportunities, but they also manage the complexity of running the business. So So, kind of answering him, I think that's built into you. I don't, I can't see myself trying to train somebody that, I mean, I could see me teaching somebody to take on the risk of a business. Don't get me wrong, but to get the spirit of wanting to do that in them, I mean, you've got people that become generals, right, in the Army, and other people that, they never climb that ladder. We see that in companies. We see people that go to work in a desk job and never are motivated to climb and go. And I mean, I can give them all the lectures about, and try to motivate them to do more, take on more, but some people just are not going to do it. So, they're race horses, and then they're horses you just ride, right? And so I don't know. I personally, I think it's innate. I think it's just part of your DNA. That's what I believe.
Here's another one that follows up on that a little bit in terms of your own personality, what you enjoy doing, what parts of the job you enjoy doing. Renee in Denver, Colorado writes in, any advice for a visionary who struggles with the boring parts, finance, HR, and legal? Can you be an entrepreneur but not deal with some of the things you usually have to deal with?
Now that I think you probably can. I think you just have to hire people to work for you that are very good in those areas, have the experience, the knowledge, the education, the training to take on those kind of things. A real entrepreneur, and let's just look at some of the ones, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Henry Ford. Let's go back to some of the older guys and some of the people that built great companies. They had people in finance department. They had people in HR. They had people in the legal department. They didn't run that. They didn't want to run that. Henry Ford wanted to build cars. He was all about, cars, sales, marketing. What is the market? Where can we, dealerships and all of that kind of stuff. But he had a team of people under him that did all of those things. And the same goes for all these other great entrepreneurs that we know. They're not in the accounting department down there trying to figure out how to get the taxes paid or how to, get the audit done or those kind of things, or how to even produce a monthly P&L. They're not doing that. So don't worry about that. Yeah. But if you have the vision and you have the spirit and you're willing to put that under you and take the risk of it, you're an entrepreneur. So, but if you're not willing to do any of that, and you say, well, I'm a visionary, I can see these things that need to be done, but I'm not going to take on that responsibility of the risk of trying to make a profit and whatnot. Well, if you're not going to do that, then you're just seeing opportunities, but you're definitely not an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur just wraps all that in, hires the right people to go run it, puts people under him, gets it done, focuses on making sure that we move forward with sales and making the product or doing the service or whatever it is, and he sees the client opportunities and the expansion opportunities, and he's out there pushing all the sales and the development and the growing of the business. That's the entrepreneur. And he's willing to take the risk of making a profit. And he sees how to make a profit. Because if he doesn't, where's he going to go? I mean, first of all, if he's going to lose all his own money, and then if he's taking on investors, he's going to lose their money too. But chances of an investor lining up behind a guy that doesn't have a good game plan is very slim.
Yeah, and I would certainly say from my standpoint, even if you don't like it, and I'm speaking specifically of the financial parts, understand it. Make sure
you got to understand it. Sure.
Understand it. You have to be able to answer the questions. You may not want to deal with HR, but you better understand the process, right? I always tell people, I don't want there to be anything in this company that I couldn't do if needed, because that's just, my belief is in the end, there's only one person whose responsibility it is, yours.
Yep. If the buck stops somewhere, right? It's going to stop with the guy at the top.
You got that right. Here's a question about financing. We've talked about financing a little bit here on the show, but Dre in Atlanta wrote in, when is debt smarter than equity for scaling?
Well, there's usually a blend of equity to get you going and up and running. But if you've got a business that is throwing off enough cash that you can borrow against it, you probably don't need the equity. If you're, let's just say you're a private company. If you're a private company and you don't want to take the dilution and sell off part of your company to investors, and you have enough cash flow, and you can go to the bank, and banks finance cash flow and assets. So if you have those things, you can borrow money. I think leveraging your company makes a lot of sense versus giving away equity if you have something that you're building. I happen to have a friend who built $1 billion company with limited amount of equity coming in. He did it on his own, totally leveraged the company. He's doing $1 billion a year right now, and he's took very little dilution. So he owns, the majority of his company by not bringing in a bunch of partners, by not taking the company public and diluting his ownership. So it's a balance. If you have the cash flow, if you don't have the cash flow, and you want to scale your company, the chances are, but yet you can get the cash flow, but you're going to have to scale it a little bit more to be able to do it. And usually what we see is that in bricks and mortar companies or in biotech companies where they have to have a lot of cash to support what it is they're doing. So it is truly a balance, and you got to look at cash flow. You got to look at, what are my assets? What's it going to cost me to go and climb? Do I have the cash flow to be able to support that? If you do, and you can eliminate not taking equity, then you should, do that. But then there's also not over leveraging the company, and where it might make sense to bring a little equity in and take a little dilution so that you've got good balanced coverage. You got to look at debt to equity, and that's what banks are going to look at. They're going to look at that. They're going to look at debt to equity, and they're going to say, in this company, here's what your debt to equity ratio ought to be, and this is what the industry is willing to support. And banks are governed, as you know, very strictly. I mean, so they have oversight that will look at their portfolio of debt to determine whether or not these accounts are balanced appropriately. So that's what you're up against. And if you've got a good banker who's a friend, you can actually go into that banker and say, tell me, what is the opportunity here for me to finance this based on my cash flow? Here's what my EBITDA is, my earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. This is what it is. What does my lending situation look like, my borrowing situation? And if you've got a good banker that knows his stuff, he can sit there and tell you, here's what I think we can do for you. We can get you to this level, but you may go in and he might say to you, we can only go here. And then you realize if I'm trying to scale my company to there, I'm going to have to fill that gap with equity. And you'll know that when you get there. But work with your banker, and hopefully you've got good finance people working with you that also can advise you on that. So that's what I would say. There is a balance, and you'll learn that as you go through the process.
Absolutely. Let's get to Evan in Kansas City, who wrote in, Richard, at info@scrushionbusiness.com, which we invite everybody to do. If you have a question, you can follow us on social media at scrushionbusiness, and you can head to our website, scrushionbusiness.com. By the way, if you're watching us on YouTube, please like this video. Also, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell to get the notifications. And of course, you can also find us on all the major podcast outlets, Scrushy on Business. But Evan in Kansas City had written in, and we talked about growth before and expanded. What signals tell you a concept, Richard, should stay hyper-local versus going statewide or national?
It really depends on the business and what's driving your success. There are companies that have local relationships and local contracts that are the majority of their business. There may be a manufacturing business, for example, in a city that is just one-off. One company, they make that. When I think of that, I think of Bush Hog down in Selma, Alabama. They make Bush Hogs, and they're in Selma, Alabama. If you're a company in Selma and you make products for Bush Hog to put into their machine, and that's the majority of what you're selling, and that they're your biggest customer, and that's 90% of what you do, or even 100% of what you do, that's probably not a company that you can build into an international company. I mean, you have to know that there are customers. So it's really a function of your customer base. If you can sell your product outside of your local area, there are a lot of businesses. I mean, there's some successful restaurants in certain cities that probably would not work in other cities, okay, because of the local people that support them. Now, why do they support them? Because, the guy that is the guy that owns it. He's well known in the community, and everybody wants to go to Joe's place because they all know Joe. And Joe, when they come in, he knows their kids and their family, so they support Joe every week. But Joe's concept might not be one that he could grow outside of his own given market. So that's something that we have to analyze and we have to look at. Now, there are businesses that scale internationally, and they scale extremely well internationally. Others are more a national business, more only good for the U.S. And then there's some that are more local or maybe even statewide or maybe even regional. There's certain things that work extremely well in the South, or maybe it works really well up in the Northeast, for example, or in California. I mean, there's certain restaurants out in California that people like that are health places that you probably, wouldn't do so well in Houston. I mean, I'm just saying. So it's really a matter of where your customer base is, and who your customer base is, and where they are, and that's going to determine your scalability. It always does. And so that's what we have to focus on. Is it something that you could sell worldwide? Is it something you sell nationwide? Is it just in the U.S.? Is it just in your particular local area? So it's a pretty simple question. It's a good question, but it's something you need to think through. Now, let me tell you why that's important, Dave. The importance of that is, can you raise money on Wall Street? Let me tell you, if all you can do is if your business is really good in your local area, but you can't at least go regional, chances are no. Would venture capital put money into just a local business? No. Can you scale it? Can you expand outside of a regional area? If you can grow it and you can scale it and you can show them how, and again, we go back to demographics. What are the demographics? Are they just the people that live in your area, or is it everybody in the entire country? Well, if it's everybody in the entire country, that's great. Then that means that there's a chance that you can scale this business and grow it nationally. And that's where the investor wants to go, because he can see now. Remember, we talked last week about 5 to 6 times your money in 5 to 6 years. If you in your mind can say, okay, with the scaling of this, if they put in $1 million here and we can build the EBITDA up to, from $1 million a year to 20 million to $30 million a year, and this guy owns X% of the company, he's going to make 5 to 6 times this money. If you can show him that, and he invests in the company, then you're in great shape. So these are things that you will look at and you will be able to see as you start thinking about going outside of your local area. What's the real customer base? So that's the end of that's that story, and that's pretty simple to do.
Melanie in Seattle asks our final question of the day, Richard, and it ties in with this same thought. And it's something I asked you about as you were expanding Health South she says, how do you balance speed of growth with quality control so the brand doesn't slip as you scale? What I asked you was more so, how do you run a company while you're growing it internationally at the same time? And that part of the answer was you have great people and you've set it up that way. But Melanie wants to know, how do you do it without losing some of that quality control if you're the person overseeing it?
Yeah, that's also a great question. You have to have processes. You have to have protocols. You have to set standards, and you've got to build a QA or quality assurance program within your organization. So you set up all the standards. It's just like McDonald's and again Chick-fil-A and Burger King and all the others. They've set up, this is the way it's got to be. So no matter where you buy a Big Mac, it's going to taste pretty much the same anywhere you go. And it's the same way in other businesses. You should expect the same customer service no matter whether you're in New York or whether you're in Miami. It should be the same everywhere you go. They should have. So you're going to have standards. And you're going to have to audit those standards. So you're going to have an internal audit program that's not just auditing the financial results, but auditing the customer service, QA. If you put all the right standards in there, and like running a healthcare company, one of the things we had to do in building, especially in the sports medicine area, if you had a particular tear in maybe your shoulder or in your knee, or you had an elbow issue, we had treatment protocols. And those treatment protocols were followed in every facility. It didn't matter which facility you went to, we were going to treat you the same way. And all of our therapists were trained on those protocols. We actually put together the orthopedist and the physical therapist that came in and developed those protocols for the treatment of all kinds of different injuries. And by doing that, we then set things up so that the patient experience was always good. And we had results that were good because we did everything the way that it needed to be done. And we audited that. And as far as cleanliness of facilities, we audited that. We wanted to make sure that everything was always, attractive for the patients. One of the things that we even did, which people thought I was crazy, and that was that we required that our receptionist smile every time somebody came into the front door. We required that all trash was picked up in the parking lots. We required that, we checked the floors. All the floors had to shine in our facilities because we knew that if you came into the facility and the place was clean and people were smiling, you're going to have a better result. And rather than people being kind of hateful and the place being dirty and trash cans overrunning and whatnot. I don't know if y'all heard the story. President Trump this past week was talking about that his dad told him that if the front door of a restaurant was dirty, that the kitchen was dirty, don't go in, don't buy food there. Well, it's kind of the same thing. If the first people you meet don't smile and they treat you mean, chances are you're probably not going to want to go back. So, getting back to, just quality control of the brand, making sure that if it's a service, that it's the same service everywhere you go. If it's a product, they're going to get the same product, in the manufacturing facility, whatever your product is. I don't care if it's what it is. I mean, healthcare is one of the most difficult things you can do, but we can make sure that the patients had clean sheets. We can make sure that everybody treated the patients, in a very friendly kind of way, and we audited that. And if we ever had mail-ins from any of our customers and said that they had a bad experience, we researched that and we dealt with that. So you've got to put systems in place from the beginning. And again, you go back and I don't care which Chick-fil-A you go into or which McDonald's you go into, and I use those examples. Whataburger is probably a good example for us out here in Texas. You're going to get the same experience, and those experiences are audited internally. I remember the day that I was told that Delta Airlines had mystery rider on most of the flights, somebody that would just watch the way that the flight attendants treated the customers, those kind of things, to make sure that the experience that everybody got was the same on every flight so that they would come back. And you have, because what people miss in business is repeat business. You have a customer come in, you want him to come back, and back. So when you start adding those customers, that's how you build your volume. And people they miss the fact that if somebody has a bad experience, Dave, they'll tell 5 people within 24 hours. And it kind of spider webs out and networks out that this is, it had don't go there. They had a bad experience there. Those people didn't treat him right. Man, I'm not going there because he told me. So you got to make sure that the result of every customer coming into your business is more like, man, I went there and it was great. Boy, I went there and those people were so nice. I'll go back there again. And if you create that environment, you're going to grow your business.
That's great. It's great information. It is obviously the first thing people know about your company. And the same goes for your website, by the way, because that's often nowadays the first impression people get about your business. So make sure that when you log on to your website, you see an experience that is very similar, very welcoming, something that you would like to have in front of your clients as the very first thing that they see about your business. So I love that about the front door of a restaurant, because it is very telling. Do they care? Do they care? Richard,
Absolutely.
great questions this week from our audience, and we continue to invite people to send in their questions. info@scrushyonbusiness.com. Next week on the show, Richard, is going to be very exciting. Looking forward to a conversation with someone you know, Hunter Carr. Tell us about that conversation we'll have next week.
Yeah, Hunter Carr is he's the serial entrepreneur. I mean, I'm telling you, he is. He at a very young age, he started a company, he built it up, and he sold it. And you're going to love his story when he tells you about that first business, what he saw. I don't think there are a lot of us that would have seen that one. I don't care how big of an entrepreneur you are and how big of a visionary you are. This guy saw something that most of us would have never seen. He started a business, built it up, sold it. And he told me, I was talking to him the other day, and he said, I sold it for more money than I ever dreamed I would get for it. But then he went and started another business. And it was a business that I doubt I would have ever thought to start up. And then he built that up and he sold it. And then after he did that, he started another business. And that was and this particular business was driven by something different. And he's going to tell you about that. And he's had ups and downs. I mean, he's fought with partners, and he'll be able to talk about that. And that will be really interesting. We also have coming on, I got to say this, talked to him actually before the podcast today because we wanted to have him on, but he was unable to be on. A man that built a consulting business in Washington, D.C. And he was kind of I called him a power lifter because he knew everybody. And he helped so many companies that would have been crushed by various different bills and things that Congress and the Senate were doing if they were not aware of what was going on. And he really helped companies understand things that were before the lawmakers in Washington, and when they needed to complain or when they needed to meet with somebody or write in or do something, he made sure they were on top of their game. And so he is going to come on the show. And then we got the big entrepreneur out of Atlanta that has a worldwide customer and has been tremendously successful over the last 20 years. We're going to put him on. But I was looking at something the other day, and they were saying, what is one of the biggest lies that is told to people about business? And I was looking at that, and the lie was the biggest lie is build it and they will come. And I thought, yeah, that is exactly right, because, just building it and expecting them to walk in the door. And I actually was in a business at one time where the guy said, I built this and they didn't come. And I said, well, you didn't build it right, and you didn't fund it right, and you didn't put it in the right place. So this show, Dave, is an awareness show to those people out there that are thinking about building a business. Yeah, are you going to put it in the right place? I mean, is it structured right? Is it the right the right concept? I mean, there are a lot of things that are going to govern the success. Obviously, many of the companies we talked about today were right. They were the right things, and they have been very, very successful. So you got to be very careful and make sure that you set it up right. You got the plan, you got the cost, you got the promotion, and you got the marketing. We got to make sure that it fits with trends now, and it fits with technology. Now, right now, there are a lot of young people that are using AI to help them with their plans and with everything else. But I got to tell you this, Dave, this is kind of funny. I had a guy send me something the other day, and he was trying to get me to help him with something. And so he sent me this information on his company, and I read it, and I went, this is too perfect. This has got to be AI. So I put in the information that I thought he would have put in to get AI to tell him that, and it printed out exactly what he had pretty much had given me. And I realized that this guy didn't do any of this on his own. He just went into AI and said, hey, tell me how to do this, and it told him. And he sent that to me. And I really kind of lost a little bit of respect. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, no, it does. There's certain places that AI is very, very beneficial, and certain places where it can get you in trouble. The first part is I've had people send me things that were obvious AI, and they didn't check it. because the information was incorrect, which, as you always look, especially on Chat GPT, right at the bottom, it tells you it's not always correct.
Not always correct, and that's a problem. But if you're looking at somebody and you want to hopefully pull something out of that person, and you find out that it was pulled out of AI, it's just not the same. And back in the day, you can tell that if somebody wrote it, and when you ask them questions, do they know the information? Now, I'm not going to knock AI, because we all will be using AI in the future, and there are a lot of great companies that are going to use AI. And I have nothing I only have great things to say about it. But and they're going to be great companies built, technical companies but how you got to ask, what's the revenue model? Okay, tell me how we're going to make money doing this. Tell me, how's that going to scale? And there are a lot of companies that are going to scale very well. And of course, we see them every day. I mean, we're being bombarded in Facebook. We've been bombarded in the internet with all of these things, trying to get you to download this app, download that app. This one, you think that's a great idea, and you find out it's $125 a year, or it's $8 a week, or it's $5 a month, or something. Next thing you know, you've got all of these great ideas charging you every month. So you have to be very, very careful. Then you have to hire one. Then you have to download an app to cleanse your phone and get rid of all the stuff, right? So, but there are so many different things that you can do now that are technology driven and that are digital and that will use AI, that are going to be financially great businesses. So I don't want to knock it, but at the same time, there are going to be a lot of things that are not going to produce. So you got to make sure that you're in the right place. Research, product, trends, market. You got to look at everything. Customers, understand that. How are you going to structure the business? What's the revenue model? What's the long-term plan? Are you going to set it up as an LLC? Is it going to be a C Corp? Are you thinking you might be able to make this a public company at some point? That's going to determine how you structure it from the beginning. There's so many different things to think about. Info at scrushionbusiness.com. Send those questions in. We'll try and answer as many as we can. We appreciate your viewership. We thank you for watching the podcast. We want you to continue. We hope that we can provide information to you that is valuable, or at least entertaining, and that you'll want to hear more. But I'm going to tell you, if you miss Hunter Carr next week, you're going to miss something, because he's going to be a hoot. I can tell you that right now, Dave.
Looking forward to it. Hunter Carr coming up next week on Scrushy on Business. Everybody have a great week, and we will talk to you next week on Scrushy on Business.
That's right. Follow that dream.